Hi. Have you ever wondered why you are the way you are? This is a question my wife asks me quite often. Maybe if we understood how we became the person we are, we have a better chance of becoming the person we would like to be. Modern psychologists would tell us there are three main influencers that shape us into the person we become. And those three influencers are heredity, environment, and the last one is our response to those first two. So let's look at heredity. Dean Karnezes, who is the ultramarathon man, a person who's ran long stretches like 200 miles in one shot without resting. When giving guidance, people asking him what it takes to be a world-class athlete, his advice is choose your parents well. DNA, heredity is an important factor. We are all wired to certain predispositions. In the Spartan culture, children that weren't perfect were actually murdered. So heredity, depending on your culture, is very important. For us, it gives us clues on really who we should be. Again, our DNA, our predispositions, kind of give us clues and guidance to where we will succeed and where we will fail. In the book, Now Discover Your Strength by Marcus Buckingham and Donald Clifton, they talk about identifying your strengths, and they actually have a test that you can take in the book called the Strength Finder test. And what they're basically, their guidance is to identify your strengths, know what your strengths are, and play to your strengths. One way to recognize a strength is when you're engaged in it, it gives you energy. I know for myself, a lot of my strengths are in the field of communication. When I'm making these videos or I'm writing, when I'm done, I tend to have more energy than when I started. My wife has noticed that at times when I'm working on a book or an article I'm really into, I'll start working on it in the morning, and come 10, 11 o'clock at night, I'm still writing. I'm really enjoying what I'm doing and I don't want to stop. So there's a clue that you're playing to a strength. Again, these are our predispositions. This is our DNA. It's kind of how we're wired. Again, if you take someone who's wired to be a really tough individual, that might be a great drill sergeant, but a poor marriage counselor. We need to pay attention to how we are wired. Where are our strengths? In the book, Now Discover Your Strengths, which again I highly recommend, they talk about, say, a scale for your strengths. And let's say for myself, I'm really poor at math. You don't want me acting as an accountant or doing your taxes or anything involved with math. On a scale of 1 to 10, we'll say world class is 7, 8, 9, 10, somewhere around there, and 5 is average, and below that is poor. For me, my math skills would be about a 2. They're really bad. I can add my fingers up and come up with different numbers all the time. So again, not one of my strengths. In the book, they talk about studies have reflected that people that really attack a weakness and try to improve it can usually move up by about 2 points on that scale. So if I'm a 2 in math and I work really, really, really hard, I can move myself up to maybe a 4. Well, that's still below average. So I would be much happier and probably do a lot better to focus on my strengths and take a natural 6 up to an 8 or 9. So where my strengths are being more creative and communicating, again, my writing skills I can improve, my math skills probably not. Where that gives us clues, again, how we're wired is it gives us that direction, again, where we're going to be happy and where we should pursue for success. Again, for myself, any job that requires great math skills, I can check off as don't pursue this. Engineer, not going to happen. Architect, no. Mathematician, physicist, no. So we need to know these, or we're going to set ourselves up for possible failure and a great deal of frustration, not only for us, but for others. And in our culture, we tend to be weakness focused. There have been surveys where parents have been asked, if your child brings home a report card with, say, a few A's, a B, a C, and an F, what do you give the most attention? And almost always they point out the F. Again, we need to work around the weaknesses and focus on the strengths. We need to flip it, do a 180 degree on what our focus is. I remember working with a lady at a factory who I swear I love the lady. She was a dear friend, very nice, very polite, but you'd swear she was as dumb as a bag of rocks. Just didn't seem to have a lot of common sense. You had to be very patient when you were training her or working with her. And just, didn't seem that bright. We had our first potluck dinner that she was involved in, and the food she brought was the best food that was on the table. She was an incredible cook. We had, over the years where we worked together, several potluck dinners, and everyone would find out what dish she brought, and that's what we went for. She was an incredible cook. Those were her strengths. So with you, again, for heredity, how are you wired? Where are your strengths? What are your predispositions? You want to find ways to work towards your strengths and work around your weaknesses. Don't spend a lot of time and attention on those weaknesses. You want to focus on your strengths. Let's take a look at that second influencer, our environment. I was very blessed in that I was raised in a loving family where I had a very healthy, good environment to grow up in. I would say my childhood was one sort of like Leave It to Beaver. We had all our needs met and a very loving environment. I had friends that weren't so blessed and came out of sort of abusive environments, but I watched them grow into wonderful, healthy people. Our environment needn't define us. So if someone comes from a bad environment or a good environment, once we leave, it's really up to us to become the person that we want to become. Another book I highly recommend is How Full Is Your Bucket by Tom Roth and Donald O. Clifton. Second book I mentioned by Mr. Clifton. In the book they use a metaphor for life of we are a bucket with water, and every exchange we have with an individual or environment, each person either adds a dipper to our bucket or they remove a dipper from our bucket. And our well-being is represented by that water or how full that bucket is. So everyone that dips out of our bucket, a negative exchange, someone that tears us down in some way, hurts our sense of well-being. And anytime someone puts a dip in your bucket, they compliment you or help you or boost you or build you up, they improve your sense of well-being. That's what our environments and our exchanges can do. I love the movie Cars. It's one of my favorites to one of my grandsons. And the main character in the Disney film Cars is a sports car named Lightning McQueen. Well, imagine if his environment where he was built or born, not sure how it goes with cars, was that of winter, where the roads were all icy and mud packed. He would then, let's say all his friends were four-wheel drive. They would probably always be making fun of him and he'd never get to show his strength. So it would be a horrible environment for him to be in. Probably very depressing for the poor little car. And then spring comes and the ice melts, the mud washes away, and the pavement is dry and smooth. Now all of a sudden he can open up and he's leaving the other cars in his dust. He can use his strengths. Our environment is like that. It's very important. I love a quote that Albert Einstein said, that if you judged a fish by his ability to climb a tree, that fish would always think he was stupid. And that's not the environment for fish. We need to know the environments where we can use our strengths. We need to recognize if the environment is a positive one or a negative one. If you're caught in a negative environment, be it in your relationship, any relationship, or say at work or anywhere, you really only have three choices on how to deal with that environment. You either change your relationship, change yourself, or walk away. Change your relationship by talk it out. If the problem is with your boss or significant other or someone in your family, talk and try and resolve the issues. That second one, change yourself. Come to the conclusion that, there's a lot of bad happening, but there's also a lot of good here. So I can handle the bad. Maybe you can handle the bad work environment because, the pay and the benefits, and you don't have to work around that boss that much anyway. So you know what? It's okay. If you can't resolve it or take care of those first 2 points, you can change the relationship or change yourself, then it's time to walk away. Staying in a negative relationship where people are pulling out of your bucket constantly is just going to destroy your sense of well-being. Okay, now let's look at that third one. which is the most important one, and that's how you respond to those first two. When we look at the three, heredity, environment, and how we respond to the first two, it really all comes down to that third one, our response. Heredity gives us information, again, our weakness and our strengths, and environment is, good, bad, or neutral, but it will influence us only as long as we let it. And when it's in our rear view mirror, like our Lightning McQueen in springtime, blowing away from the four-wheel drives, once they're in the rear view mirror, they're in the rear view mirror. At some point, we will have control. If you haven't seen my video called The Hero's Journey, check it out. I meant for it to be sort of a companion video to this one to take up where this one leaves off.